damaged or lost, you won't be able to play it anymore. So I've got Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart installed here. It's a disc-based game, and obviously I'm not able to run the game without the disc. The idea here is that we can take that disc-based game, turn it into a backup version that we can then reinstall on the PS5 and run without the original disc needing to be in the console. And the same goes for our PlayStation 4 games as well. The backups are slightly different between PS4 games and PS5 games, but I will be showing both here in this video. Also, the retail version of these games here, I do not have them on the base version. If I go to information, you can see Ratchet & Clank is on version 1.005, and Bloodborne is on version 1.09, and that's so that our game backup will also be on the same game version as the original retail copies. So I want to get the original retail copies updated to a higher patch, so that the game backup will also be on that higher patch when we load the backup version. So if you want to know how to update your retail games to a higher update, I do have a video. It's an older video, but it still applies there, so you can watch that video to learn how to get your PlayStation 4 and 5 games updated for your retail copies, and then you can turn them into a usable backup that has those updates already installed. So the first thing we need to do is switch over to the computer, grab ourselves a USB drive. Now you want to make sure the USB drive is formatted in exFAT format, so if you right-click and go to Properties, make sure the file system of the drive is exFAT, and if it's not, you can right-click and reformat the drive, and make sure you select exFAT as the file system, and click Start to reformat it, but obviously back up any data that was previously on the drive before doing so. So from here, inside the root of the USB drive, we're going to right-click and create a new folder called Homebrew, and then inside that folder, we're going to want to copy the config file for the app dumper. So the PS5 app dumper here from EchoStretch, I'll leave a link in the video description. We go into the releases section, and then we simply download the appdumper.l file itself for the main payload. Now there is a new release of the app dumper, version 1.11, so if you're just dumping PlayStation 5 games, I would recommend using the latest version here, but the latest version does seem to miss some files when dumping PS4 games, so if you're dumping PlayStation 4 games, I would recommend using the previous version, version 1.10, but if you're dumping PlayStation 5 games, you can just use the latest version. But what we really want here is inside the source files, we want to go to the source folder, and then go to the Homebrew folder, and download this config.ini file. You can just click Download Raw File here to download it to your computer, and then you want to copy that config file inside the Homebrew folder. Then we're going to open the config file in Notepad, and inside the config file there's an option to enable elf to fself. We're going to change that from 0 to 1. So we're going to go ahead and save that there, and we should be good to go. We just need to copy the payload file to the root of the USB drive, the appdumper.l file, and then we can plug that USB drive into the PS5. Okay, so back on the PlayStation 5, we cannot run the game, of course, without the disc, so I need to insert the game disc. And that will, of course, allow us to launch the game. So there we go. I've inserted the game disc. I can launch the game. You basically just want to get the game into the main menu. You don't want to actually load into the game where it's streaming in assets and things, because that can cause problems and make it take longer to dump the game. So it's better just to get the game in a state where it's not really having to do anything in-game. So just the main menu or the start screen is where you want to get to here. Okay, so now that we're in the start screen, we can press the PS button, go back to the home page. We can load up the payload manager. So make sure you obviously have the jailbreak running and you have the payload manager loaded. I cover how to set all this up in my initial video in the series, and the playlist for that series is linked in the video description, which I'll show you how to get set up to this point. So from here, what we're going to do is head into the settings and make sure Scan USB Payloads is enabled. And then we can go to Manage Payloads, scroll down to the very bottom, and we can go to the app dumper here and move it to internal storage. So we can move it or copy it to the internal storage. And then we can go to the dashboard section. We have it here, PS5 app dumper. So making sure the USB drive is plugged into your PS5 and that you have the game running, we can select PS5 app dumper, which will start the dumping process so you can see it detects the game. And we can go back onto the game here, and it will start dumping it. So just give it a few seconds, and there it goes. It is now dumping the game, 2% progress. So skipping ahead here to when the dump is almost finished, after extracting all the game files, the final step is to decrypt all the executable files, which is what it's doing here. And once it's finished, it will say dump complete, which means the app dumper is no longer running, and we can now close out of the game with our game dump now on the USB drive. So once we close out of our PS5 game, we can do the same with Bloodborne, our PS4 game. The process is exactly the same. So once the game is loaded, we just run the app dumper payload and wait for the dump to complete. The difference with PS4 games is that by default, the dumper will split the game and the update into separate folders, whereas PS5 games have the game and update merged into one folder. So that is the main difference. Okay, so once we have our retail copies of our PS4 and PS5 games dumped, we can delete the retail versions of our console here, because I want to install and test the dumped versions. So we can test the PS5 game immediately by going into our payload manager again, and then from the payload manager, we want to load KStuff Lite, which is needed to be able to load our game dumps. We need KStuff loaded, and then also for our PS5 game dumps, we want Shadow Mount Plus also loaded. Obviously, I've covered how to install these payloads in my main tutorial, which is part of the playlist, which is linked in the video description. If you're not set up to this point, you can check the previous videos. So from here, what we can do is simply go ahead and wait for it to detect our game dump, because the game dump of Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart is on the Homebrew folder in the USB drive, which is a location that is scanned by Shadow Mount Plus, and because of that, the game gets added here to our home page. So this is the dumped version. Notice that we don't have a disk icon anymore, because this is the dumped version, and it's also on version 1.005, so it was successfully dumped with the update installed. Now, normally we could just launch this and the game would run. With many PlayStation 5 games, that's all you have to do. Just launch the game dump and it should load. However, there are quite a few games that require certain system modules to be swapped out at runtime in order to get the dumps to work, like the AMPR emulator or the PlayGo emulator, to get certain games working, and Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart is one of the games that has this issue. So the dumped version will not load on its own. We do need to apply a fix for this particular game, and there are quite a few games that you'll have to do this for. And PlayStation 4 games are not automatically mounted by Shadow Mount Plus, because we'll be turning those into fake package versions, which is a different way of installing our game dumps. Okay, so switching back over to the computer with our USB drive plugged in, if we go to the Homebrew folder, we have our PS5 game here, which is just a single folder. Then our PS4 game dump was split between the game and the patch file into two separate folders. So in order to fix our PS5 game, all we have to do is go into the folder, the app0 folder, right-click in this folder and create a new folder called fakelib. And then inside the fakelib folder, we're going to copy the AMPR fix, which I'll leave linked in the video description. I'll just copy the SPRX file for this EMPR file here. Now, some games might also require the PlayGo fix as well, that you can copy into the same location. I think Ratchet & Clank seems to work fine with just the AMPR fix, so that's the only file I need. You can test with just having one of the files in there and see if it works. If not, you can add both, and that should hopefully fix that game. So that's all we need. I could plug the USB drive back in and load up the game, and it should work. PS4 games are more complicated because we need to turn them into fake package files, which will allow them to be installed and loaded on the console with just KStuff. Shadow Mount Plus is not required for the PS4 games when they're in fake package form, plus it will also allow us to install these package files on any jailbroken PS4 that you might also have. What we need to do first of all is get the PS4 fake package tools, which I'll leave linked in the video description. All we need to do is run gengp4 app.exe, and then we go into the folder here, so app0. If I hold down shift, right click on the folder, I have the option to copy as path. I can copy it as path, paste in the location here, get rid of the double quotes. So the location of our app0 folder, and we generate the GP4 file and then wait for this to complete. Okay, and once complete, we can save the GP4 file once it says it's done to the same location, the Homebrew folder, where our game dump folders are located. Then we're going to open gengp4patch.exe and do the same thing with the patch file. So all we do is grab the location of the patch file, the patch0 folder, and we paste in the location here, get rid of the double quotes, and then generate the GP4 file. Okay, and once that one is done, we can save the GP4 file in the same location as the other one. Okay, so now all we need to do is simply open up the arbispubgen.exe from the fake package tools, go to File, Open, and we want to open the -app.gp4 file first to generate the application package, and we're going to build it, and then for the output path, we're going to click on Select, and then we're going to select, of course, the same location, the Homebrew folder. Now, there is a build button at the bottom, but it might be cut off on your screen like you can see here. It's cut off on my screen. I can't see the build button. If that happens, after selecting your output path, you can just press the Tab key on your keyboard, or the down arrow key on your keyboard, and that should take you over the build button, and then you just press enter, and it will start building. So we do get this issue here where it says format of PNG file is not valid for pick1.png. So that's an issue probably just when dumping a game through PS5. But what we can do is simply fake the PNG file from the patch folder instead. If we go into the patch folder and go into SCE system, we actually have pick1.png as the proper picture. So we can basically just copy the pick1.png file from the patch folder and then copy it into the app0 folder in SCE system, paste it in, override the original, and that should hopefully fix it. So all we have to do is simply go back to build again, build the game file, build, and now we no longer get that error message, and it's building the fake package for the game. Okay, so once we're done, we get process finished with warnings. Warnings is fine, you just don't want any errors. So if we go to File, Open again, and this time we open the patch GP4 file, then we simply click Build, and for our output path, we're going to select the same location that we built the game package file to, the same location there, and then we just go ahead and click Save and Build, and that will build the patch. You want to make sure that your GP4 files are in the same location as the original game package file that you built. Otherwise, you could get an error message where it's unable to build the patch because it can't find the game package file to build the patch on top of. So that should be all good. We just wait for this to complete and we'll have our PS4 game dump ready. But the patch file is now built. It says create image process finished with warnings. So here we go. So if we look at this, it looks like a bit of a mess. Now we don't need the GP4 files or the log files or any of that stuff. I can also delete the PlayStation 4 game dump folders, although generally you would want to test the fake packages to make sure they work first before deleting the original game dump in case there's an issue. But I'm pretty confident it should be fine in this case. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete all of those files now that we don't need. Okay, so last thing we need to do is simply cut these PS4 fake package files out of the Homebrew folder and into the root of the USB drive so that they can be installed on the PS5. So now we can unplug our USB device, plug it into the PS5, and get our game dumps running. So of course we already have our PlayStation 5 game that was detected by Shadowmint Plus before, so it should be ready to launch. But for our PS4 game, we'll need to go into our settings, go to our debug settings game, and then go to package installer, where we will find our package files for Bloodborne, and we can just install both of those to install the game file and then the update. Okay, so that is it installed. Well, the game is installed, but it's still on version 1.0 if I go to information, but it is also installing the game update file here as well. Okay, and it should now be updated to version 1.09. There we go, update successful. It is now showing 1.09, so just like my retail copies, I now have Bloodborne, my PS4 game on version 1.09, and I have Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart on version 1.005. And of course I should be able to load my Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart game dump directly off the USB, now that I have that AMPR fix added in the fake lib folder. So it says game backported, because whenever it does anything with swapping out modules in the fake lib folder, that's considered a backport, even though we're not really backporting the game, we're just swapping out that module to make the game work. But it should be all good. There we go, Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart on the start screen. Game is now loaded up. And even my save file from previous, my 0% save is still on there. So we are all good, so we can load our existing saves with our game dump version as well. So we are all good to go. So that's our PlayStation 5 game, and obviously with PlayStation 5 games, we just have them stored inside a folder still. We don't have fake package files for PS5 games yet. But of course, you can use the game compressor, which I've shown in my video on how to install PlayStation 5 game dumps in the first place. That video is also linked in the playlist in the video description that you can check out there, and that shows you how you can convert your game dump folders and also move them to the internal storage or an internal NVMe drive that's on your console. And of course, you can also use it to convert your game dump folders into a single file and a compressed file as well, like a PFS image or an exFAT image. So you can use the game compressor to convert your PS5 game dumps into different formats. There's also new methods of loading our PlayStation 5 game backups in the works and new game dump formats in development, and I will be covering those once they become available. And also, of course, our PS4 game, let's just make sure that works. So we can see that that's also loading just fine here. We'll wait till we get in. There we go. We're now in to the game, and the game is successfully loading. There it is. So we are all good to go. So that's how you create your backups for your PlayStation 5 and your PlayStation 4 games on a jailbreakable PS5 so that you can have true ownership over your own games, something that PlayStation and Sony are fighting against at the moment with their anti-consumer practices. If you have a jailbreakable PS5, you can take the games that you've purchased and you can create a DRM-free digital copy, a digital backup of that game that you have full control and ownership over, which is exactly what we want to have here. So, hope you guys enjoyed this video or found the information useful. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe, and as always, I will hopefully see